Dad shouted, "You're stupid," when I cut my hair, then refused treatment as I passed out at school. So, I cut ties and left him begging for control. The swing set chain cut my sister Emily's scalp when I was 16. Dad was obsessed with long hair on women and said, "Why weren't you more careful with it?" while she cried and bled. Each woman in his family had ankle-length hair, considering it their greatest glory. His mother carried her long hair. Dad exhibited a giant photograph of her in the main room like royalty. Rachel had waist-length hair when he married her. After my birth, he said, "I can't wait to see how long hers gets." Dad brushed my hair for an hour every night, claiming cutting it was a sin and that hair was a woman's beauty. He didn't trim splits. Rachel had weight-related migraines and knee-length hair. She couldn't drive since her hair was in the seatbelt and gear shift. Dad said, "What's the point of having beautiful hair if you're going to hide it like you're ashamed?" Emily, 14, had her hair pulled behind her. Mine reached my thighs. We used this $40 shampoo daily and detangled it for hours while Dad supervised to avoid tearing out too many strands. After sneaking into the bathroom with Rachel's sewing scissors at 9, I snipped 5 inches. I wanted to sprint without tripping on my hair. I thought Dad wouldn't mind if I cut. He broke down as he combed my hair that night and saw the uneven ends. He didn't yell at first, which was awful. He said, "You've destroyed something precious that can never be replaced." He left and returned with a floor-length wig. He urged I wear it daily till my hair returned. Heavy and 2.5 feet longer than my hair, the wig caused neck pain and migraines. I kept tripping. Because of school bullies, I sobbed at home, but Dad remarked, "Good. Maybe now you'll understand why you should appreciate your real hair." I wore that item for 18 months and never cut my hair again. So we could play outside with our hair blowing like shampoo ads. Dad built a swing set. Rachel said it wasn't safe, but Dad wanted fresh air. Emily swung high, her hair flying. I heard Emily scream at fabric tearing. The swing plummeted and twisted her hair since it was wrapped around the chain. Choking, she had blood down her neck. A 0.8-inch skin flap held this scalp piece. Dad ran to help, but he looked at the hair in the chain and said, "Do you have any idea how long it took to grow that?" Rachel had to push Dad aside to free Emily. Emergency. Room doctors shaved Emily's head to heal her scalp. Dad ignored her when we got home. He had her wear a wig daily till it grew back. He'd leave if the wig moved slightly. Emily woke up crying from nightmares, and Dad told her she was dramatic and beauty needed sacrifice. So much hair made school difficult. While sitting in class, kids trod on it or it became stuck in my chair. I fell over my hair and face planted on the track while racing in gym class. I wanted to vomit from headaches. Weighty hair felt like someone was pulling on my skull. When I kept falling asleep at my desk at school, teachers took me to the nurse. Dad said I was lazy, and many women had long hair without complaining. Stranger things happened. I was tired after 16 hours of sleep. I hardly woke up some mornings. My legs and arms weighed. Dad suggested I needed vitamins when Rachel commented I looked pale. I woke up bruised everywhere. One morning after brushing, my gums bled everywhere. Rachel wanted to take me to the doctor, but Dad said I was okay. Everything went dark as I proceeded to the cafe. The school nurse and kids watched me wake up on the floor. After calling an ambulance, doctors performed various tests at the hospital. The doctor concluded, "Your daughter has leukemia and needs to start chemotherapy immediately, or she'll die. Her hair will need to go." I looked at my dad, who appeared to have decided. As if all his lights were gone, his face became blank. Rachel covered her mouth as the doctor clutched her clipboard. Dad's jaw moved like he was chewing words he didn't want to say. He stared at me, then the doctor, and then me again, and I knew he was weighing my life versus my hair. The long silence made the wall clock loud. Dad spoke after Rachel gasped. He advised seeking a second opinion because this doctor didn't understand our family values. He advocated non-hair-cutting procedures. Dr. Stevens's patient expression changed. She indicated my low white blood cell count put me at risk every minute we delayed. She said the sickness was spreading swiftly and I may die without treatment. Rachel choked again, gripping the exam table. I realized she might finally challenge him. Dr. Martin stared at them and said she must leave. She left and discreetly closed the door. Dad paces the little room. On the exam table, I felt the paper crush under me while Mom cried softly. Dr. Martin returned with another woman after 15 minutes. With short black hair, the new woman clutched a folder. Sitting across from us, Hospital Social Services staffer Claire Donovan introduced herself. She stated the hospital can safeguard youngsters from parental disputes over life-saving medical treatment. Gregory talked hurriedly about his parental rights as his cheeks became red. Nodding, Lily stayed calm. She desired a private chat with Rachel and myself. Gregory deteriorated instantly. He said anything they needed to speak could happen in front of him. Claire nodded slowly and took the wall-mounted phone. "Perhaps 30 seconds, she muttered. A security guard entered 2 minutes later. A radio was on this big guy's belt. Claire sought seclusion for a hospital-mandated safety check. She told Gregory to wait in the family lounge or be taken by security. Gregory was about to burst, but security stopped the entry. With his jacket, Gregory rushed out. Remote security tracked him. Claire glanced at Rachel after they departed. Rachel was immediately asked for chemotherapy and hair removal approval. Rachel had to sit on her shivering hands. She watched the door like Gregory may break in. I saw her trying to talk. Finally she mumbled yes. Claire wrote, "Yes, please save her daughter," on institutional paperwork and reported it to Child Protective Services since denying life-saving medical care was medical negligence. Rachel wept more and stated she wasn't rejecting. Claire gently explained that the report was about Gregory's influence and the control she was already seeing. I was relieved and terrified. Our situation was eventually noticed, but I knew Gregory would go insane if he found out. Dr. Martin returned and said I was admitted to start chemotherapy tonight. She wanted a nurse to shave my hair in a few days after the therapy started to prevent clumping. I was transferred to oncology and changed into a hospital gown with Hannah, a nurse. Thin blue gems adorned the gown. Rachel seemed lost in the window chair and touched her hair to make sure it was still on her head. I was too weary to comfort Hannah, who was putting up a long metal pole with transparent liquid bags to save my life. Gregory and a suit-clad man arrived at my home 1 hour later. Gregory loudly discussed permission paperwork with the briefcase-carrying man. They requested the papers, and Gregory's lawyer threatened to sue the hospital. The security guard and a businesswoman claiming to be a hospital administrator returned. She gently said Rachel's permission was valid, and that any interference with my treatment would result in a restraining order. Gregory's lawyer seemed uncomfortable and was begging him to lower his voice, but Gregory was ranting about parental rights and religious freedom, even though we were never religious. The administrator and security guard separated them, and chemotherapy began at 8 p.m. Dr. Stevens checked on me, and said adverse effects usually appeared after several hours, and they gave me nausea medication. She then said Claire had assigned Rachel a cot in my room for the night. That made me feel safer but guilty, because Rachel was afraid Gregory might do something if she didn't come home tonight. The hospital bed was too firm, and my IV kept tugging when I moved. I couldn't understand the machine's beeping. I woke up feeling like concrete had been poured into my veins at midnight. Everything felt heavy, and my tongue tasted metallic like I'd been sucking pennies. No amount of water would remove it. Rachel was awake in the window chair, and her phone kept vibrating. She hadn't slept. I asked what was going on, and she showed me the screen. Gregory texted 30 times in an hour, first asking when she was coming home, then insulting her for ditching the family and choosing the hospital over her husband, and finally threatening to take her home if she didn't come right away. Rachel trembled while holding the phone. I told her to turn it off and ignore his texts, but her long gaze made me think she would say no, that she had to keep the screen on in case Gregory needed something. She pushed power, placed the phone face down on the little table, and we sat quietly with just the beeping equipment. My blood pressure and temperature were strange the next morning, like my bones were mush, but the nurse said it was normal for treatment and would get worse. Rachel fell asleep on the cot, her hair falling to the floor. Claire knocked and entered with another woman at 9. Claire said Violet was from Child Protection Services and needed to ask me questions. Violet was in her late 20s, young for a family historian. Her short black pixie cut showed her face and neck. She appeared to be showing me what was possible. She sat on my bedside chair with a notebook and pen and asked me to describe a normal home day. I recalled my weekly hair brushing after supper. Gregory made me kneel on the floor between his knees for an hour or two while brushing my hair. He evaluated every strand for knots or broken ends and asked why. Was my morning brushing wrong? Did I let it drag during school? Did I not use enough conditioner? He kept asking questions until I gave a suitable response. Violet silently scribbled everything down, and I couldn't stop babbling once I started. When I was 9, I told her about Gregory's wig penalty, which forced me to wear that heavy wig for 18 months after I cut 5 inches off my hair. I also told her about Emily's swing set scalp injury and how Gregory just stared at the hair in the chain as she. After telling her Rachel's hair was so long she had to carry it to walk and couldn't drive because it got caught, words came out like a faucet. I whined about being weary for weeks, bruises and bleeding gums when I brushed. I noticed Rachel in the corner crying softly while Violet wrote. Rachel wanted to take me to the doctor, but Gregory said I was okay and needed vitamins and sleep. Violet stopped writing when I mentioned the weeks of tiredness and Gregory calling me lazy, but she continued writing. Violet introduced herself and explained why she was there when Dr. Stevens entered while I was talking. She sat down and talked to Violet about my disease and treatment. The weariness, bruises, gum bleeding and school fainting were obvious, and any sensible parent would have taken me to the doctor weeks ago, according to Dr. Stevens. Gregory's refusal to seek medical care because he was afraid a doctor would want to cut my hair met the legal definition of child endangerment. Violet questioned Dr. Martin when my symptoms started and what may have happened if treatment had been delayed. Dr. Martin said I would have died within weeks without urgent treatment. The room went silent. Claire returned that afternoon and reported the hospital's ethics committee was holding an emergency meeting to discuss legal action to protect me from Gregory's treatment interference. Rachel looked uneasy but went. I tried to sleep while she was gone, but I kept thinking about Dr. Martin's statement that I would have died if we'd waited. I found it strange that Gregory would have let me die rather than cut my hair, like he valued my hair over my life. Rachel returned 2 hours later, exhausted but changed, like her face. Rachel sat on my bed and told me what happened. The committee approved my therapy and supported the CPS probe into Gregory's medical neglect and control. Rachel's voice shook, but she sounded more confident that someone had told her she could defend her child. Claire and Rachel talked in the corridor outside my room that afternoon. The door was half open, so I heard most of their conversation. Lily asked if Rachel had bank accounts or money. Rachel whispered that Gregory ran everything. She had no credit card and wasn't on the mortgage or auto titles. Claire's comment showed she'd heard this story from other women. She took out leaflets about emergency housing, legal aid, and organizations that help women escape violent marriages. Gregory managed their bank account, so she didn't know how much was there. Rachel kept crying, but this time it seemed less hopeless. When they returned, I pretended to be asleep but saw Claire leave a stack of papers on Rachel's cot's table with half-open eyelids. On day 3, Dr. Stevens told me to shave my head during morning rounds. She explained that the chemotherapy was affecting my hair follicles, so it would be less distressing to do it now. Even though I expected it, her words made me queasy. I'd been preparing for this my whole life. Every time Gregory stroked my hair and said it was my only worth, I imagined life without it. I felt afraid but oddly ready. Rachel's face turned white, and she asked to watch. I agreed quickly because I needed her to watch me. Dr. Stevens left after promising a nurse within an hour. Rachel and I stared at each other, and I could tell she was thinking about all the years of combing, preserving, and protecting our hair like it was everything. Hannah was the nurse from the first night. She had electric clippers, a plastic cape, and a mirror. She said she'd buzz my hair down to virtually nothing, then we could shave it smooth or leave some stubble. I nodded when she asked if I was ready since I didn't trust my voice. I closed my eyes as she wrapped the cloak around my shoulders and turned on the clippers, filling the room with buzzing. The sensation against my scalp started at the front and moved back, erasing and lightening me like someone had lifted a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. After Hannah turned off the clippers, the room was too quiet. I opened my eyes as she held the mirror and barely recognized the figure peering back. Rachel sobbed but paused to stroke my face and say I was gorgeous. I felt she meant it for the first time in my life. My skull and ears were more apparent than I anticipated, and my head looked little and fragile. Hair stuck to my scalp like black stubble. Someone told Gregory about my hair within hours. He may have felt, or the hospital called him. At 6 o'clock that night, I heard him shouting before I saw him. Security stopped him at the elevator and he couldn't reach my floor, but his voice carried down the corridor. He shouted that we'd damaged something irreplaceable. Gregory got louder as the security man tried to calm him down. He said the same thing when I was 9 and Rachel's scissors sliced 5. He was screaming about how we'd wrecked everything and violated the family legacy, and his mother and grandmother were probably rolling in their graves. After Hannah closed my door and turned on the TV, I heard him. I pulled the blanket to my chin, trembling, and Rachel sat on my bed holding my hand. She stopped crying and had a certain expression. After 15 minutes of ranting, I assumed security had him leave. Claire returned with legal documents that night. She told Rachel that Gregory's hospital behavior harmed my physical and mental health, and obtained an emergency protection order to bar Gregory from visiting and give Rachel medical decision-making power until a full hearing. Rachel signed every page Claire pointed to despite shaking hands. I saw her sign her name repeatedly. This was her first lawsuit against Gregory after 18 years of marriage. After Claire left with the signed paperwork, Rachel sat on my bed and we didn't talk. The TV played a show neither of us wanted to watch in the silent hospital room. I caressed my hairless head and felt my unusual new form. Nighttime nausea hit me like a truck. I vomited into Rachel's bathroom basin while bending over the bed because my body felt weak and unstable. Rachel held the basin steady while pushing my hospital gown away from my face to prevent getting anything on it. She continuously apologized, saying it was her mistake, not chemo. I dropped on the pillow feeling like I weighed 1,000 pounds. Rachel offered me water and washed my face with a cool cloth, but her movement was different. Something stronger in her posture. She felt that standing up to Gregory and signing those legal documents had unlocked something hidden behind all that hair and years of terror. She stopped requesting permission to care for me. Violet returned the next morning with a yellow legal pad of questions. This time, Violet asked if Emily was safe with Gregory at home. Rachel had to accept that Emily was still there since we didn't have time to make other plans before everything happened so fast. Rachel looked panicked when Violet said CPS needed to make a welfare check that afternoon if possible. I was sick again, but not from treatment. My sister was afraid because I knew how Gregory would react when investigators arrived to the house. I asked Violet to check on Emily, and Violet said she would personally make sure it happened today and that someone would contact us. After Violet left, Rachel sat in the window chair, looking at her phone to make it ring faster. Violet called about 4 o'clock that afternoon, and Rachel put it on speaker for me. Violet said Emily was physically protected, but she felt afraid, and Gregory dominated the session. The investigator videotaped every household detail, which Violet said was scary proof of the family's hair obsession. Gregory bragged about his parenting rights when the investigator wanted to talk to Emily alone. A whole cabinet in the bathroom held $40 shampoos and conditioners and treatments that cost more than food. The worst was the diary the investigator found in Gregory's desk, where he documented my and Emily's hair development like a science experiment. He recorded measurements, texture, thickness, and length calculations every month for years. Violet said they organized a follow-up interview at Emily's school without Gregory. So Emily could speak freely and was adding all the data to the CPS file. The next day, Rachel met Jack Hudson, a gentle lawyer with a bag of paperwork. Jack came down and said he wanted emergency custody of me and Emily. Medical negligence, Gregory's controlling behavior, and Emily's swing set scalp injury fit the case for interim custody. Claire connected us with him through a legal help program for families like ours. He stated petitioner, respondent, and interim orders might give Rachel legal authority to keep us away from Gregory while the court decides what to do long term. Rachel seemed terrified but relieved, like she was waiting for someone to tell her she could protect her children. Jack promised to start the paperwork immediately and set a court date within weeks. My first chemo treatment required 9 days in the hospital and it was funny, but I started to feel normal. Not physically normal because I was exhausted, ill and bald, but normal in that I could survive without Gregory. The nurses would ask what I wanted to eat, and I could say anything without disappointing anybody. Nobody timed or watched me in the toilet, and I could sleep without someone inspecting my hair or ordering me to do anything vital. On day 6, Emily called Rachel from her friend's house, and I heard her crying before Rachel put it on speaker. She said she couldn't remember the last time I looked calm one afternoon, which saddened me because being at a cancer hospital seemed safer than being with my father. Emily begged to stay at the hospital with us in a little scared voice, saying Gregory had gotten worse since I left, was caressing her hair every night, and that she was the only daughter he had left who kept family values. Rachel told Emily to stay at her friend's house, and that we were planning to get her out. Emily cried more, breaking my heart. After escaping, I left my younger sister to deal with Gregory's madness, which was now focused on her. Rachel shivered as she sat with her phone after the conversation. That day, Gregory sent us terrible messages about destroying the family and betraying important customs from multiple phones after she banned his primary number. Gregory's relatives and aunts, whom Rachel hadn't spoken to in years, sent notes saying Rachel was wrong and Gregory was right and we were ruining something great. Claire checked on us that night. Claire seemed alarmed as Rachel showed her all the messages. She quickly got out her laptop and snapped images of every message, adding them to the CPS file as harassment proof. She also helped Rachel get a hospital and legal team-only phone number. On day 9, I woke up feeling hot and weird, like my body was on fire. The nurse took my temperature, her countenance changed, and several people were in my room testing my blood and connecting new IV bags. Dr. Martin diagnosed me with neutropenia, a chemo-related low white blood cell count. I was moved to a bubble-like room at the end of the corridor and couldn't have guests except Rachel. The fever made everything feel odd and distant, like I was watching my life unfold to someone else. That night, I had horrible nightmares of my hair growing back and smothering me while Gregory combed it and said it looked great. I'd wake up gasping and check my head for baldness and safety. Rachel refused to go when the nurses urged rest and sleep. When I woke up at 3, she was sitting in my bedside chair watching me breathe with crimson, tearful eyes. When she realized I was awake, she told me she'd been thinking about all the years she wasted on her hair when she could have protected her girls. She spent hours a day washing, conditioning, drying and brushing when she could have worked, saved, or built a life to escape. I told her Gregory wasn't her responsibility, but she shrugged and said she stayed, making her culpable. After 36 hours, the fever subsided, and I felt normal again. Claire sat down with Rachel and asked about money and bank accounts. Rachel stated she had none. Greg had all the money. Rachel had no credit card or checking account. Claire seemed unsurprised, like she'd heard this story 100 times. She brought out leaflets about a domestic abuse program that helps women become financially independent and developed a safety plan with Rachel. The program provided emergency lodging, food, and job training. My mother took notes like she was studying for her biggest test while Claire scribbled down phone numbers, websites, and Rachel's contacts. Jack submitted the emergency custody petition to the family court the next morning, and the clerk scheduled a hearing 3 weeks out. 2 days later, Gregory received court paperwork at work. The process server stated he became white and had to sit down after reading them. The hospital security guard informed my floor at 6 p.m. that Gregory was in the lobby requesting to see me and Rachel, yelling about his rights and flashing court documents. After being told he couldn't come up without supervision, Gregory tried to push past the desk, but 2 more security personnel barred him from the elevators. Gregory yelled that this was his hospital and nobody could take his daughter. After taking a report in my room, one of the police said Gregory was still sitting in his car in the parking lot staring at the building. The police asked if we wanted a restraining order, but Rachel said the court order was enough. Claire filed the police report to Gregory's CPS file to show his lack of limits. I was nauseous because I could see Gregory's face when things didn't go his way, and he couldn't understand why others didn't see things his way. 3 days later, Emily's school nurse called Rachel at lunch. The nurse said Gregory tried to take Emily out of class over lunch, claiming Rachel had sent him to get her as a family emergency. When the school secretary demanded Rachel's permission, Gregory shouted that he was Emily's father and didn't need permission. The principal had to leave her office when they refused to release Emily without talking to Rachel. Gregory said the school was conspiring against him and holding his daughter captive. His principal told him to leave or she'd call the police. Gregory said, "Go ahead and call them because I wasn't leaving without Emily." The police arrived while Gregory was fighting with the main office secretary. The nurse said Emily was afraid after hearing Gregory yell from her classroom down the hall. Rachel called Violet immediately to report the incident, and Violet said she was pursuing an emergency removal order. Emily's social worker removed her from class in the last period that afternoon, and said she was taking her to the hospital to be with Rachel and me because she was unsafe at home. Emily never returned home to pack. Emily stared in the doorway as she entered my hospital room at 4 p.m. I saw her face while doing schoolwork in bed. She stared at my hairless head like she couldn't understand it. She didn't move or speak for a while. Her floor-length hair spilled around her feet as she stood with her bag on. After her face fell, she started weeping in heavy, breathless sobs. She dropped her backpack and ran to me, clutching me and wailing into my shoulder. After letting her tears dry, she told Rachel she wanted to chop her hair too because it was too heavy and effortful and didn't matter what Gregory thought. Her voice was shaky but furious, like she'd been holding this in forever and finally had permission to say it. Rachel's face changed 5 times in 2 seconds as she struggled between her fear of Gregory's reaction and her new commitment to protect us. She took a deep breath and promised Emily we'd work this out together and nobody would force her to keep hair she didn't want. An hour later, the CPS social worker returned with paperwork placing Emily in temporary protective care with Rachel as custo. We were all living at the hospital until we could find safe housing away from Gregory. The social worker said she'd arranged for someone to go to the house with police to get Emily's clothes and school materials. And after the nurses finished their rounds and turned off most of the lights, Emily and I whispered about Gregory's years of hairbrushing and examination, his rage over a split end, and how we'd learned to move carefully to avoid getting our hair stuck. Emily shared her dreams. She remembered the swing set accident and waking up with the chain dragging on her scalp. After the wig punishment at 9, I was afraid to chop my hair again until cancer forced me to. It was the first time we could talk openly about this without Gregory overhearing and saying we were ungrateful. Rachel accepted to a haircut from a nurse the next morning, trembling anxiously. The same nurse who shaved my head came in with scissors and comb and had Emily sit by the window. Emily said, "Shoulder length." Just lose all the weight, the nurse said, cutting large pieces of hair that fell to the floor in thick ropes. Emily looked in the mirror differently. As the nurse finished, Emily ran her fingers through her hair, barely touching her shoulders. Without knots, she could do so. She laughed astonishment and elation. Rachel wasn't crying from fear. She sobbed joyfully and mournfully, like she was mourning our lost years and rejoicing our liberation. The nurse picked up Emily's hair off the floor and asked if we wanted any. Emily denied immediately. Later that morning, Dr. Stevens said I could go. She paused and looked at Rachel, adding, "Of course we couldn't actually go home because of the protective order." Rachel grimaced since she hadn't prepared ahead. The domestic violence program's interim shelter only had 1 week, so Claire suggested we locate another. Dr. Stevens addressed temporary housing with hospital social services. That afternoon, Claire returned with information about a crisis-focused family-furnished apartment program. She suggested we stay in a modest 2-bedroom apartment near the hospital for 3 months while Rachel found a job and we found permanent housing. The flat was part of a domestic abuse victim program, and a subsidy covered the rent. Claire helped Rachel apply in my hospital room. 2 days later, we were permitted to move in anytime we wanted, and moved into the flat on Saturday morning with only the clothes bags Claire helped Rachel pack during a supervised visit while Gregory was at work. A police officer prevented Gregory from returning early. Rachel said it was strange to walk through her own house like a stranger, taking only what we needed and leaving the rest. The tiny run-down flat on the 3rd floor of an old building had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a lock Gregory couldn't open. On our first night we ordered pizza and ate on the living room floor. Emily's argument that this was our first real home made sense. Our childhood house was like Gregory's hair museum. It was terrifying for Rachel to attend a 3-day-a-week job training program through domestic violence services to learn basic computer and office skills, since she hadn't worked since before I was born and didn't know Excel or email. However, the program was for women like her who'd been unemployed for years due to abusive marriages. They helped her highlight her humanitarian work and Gregory's firm accounting on her resume and rehearsed interviews until she could answer without shaking. The teacher told Rachel about a remote part-time data entry job at a medical billing company 2 weeks into training. Rachel was hired 3 days later and made $12 an hour, but Gregory couldn't access her bank account. Claire suggested I keep a blue diary. I didn't know what to write, but I got it out by writing about years of weekly hairbrushing and Gregory checking every inch for damage, the heavy wig punishment, and how the other kids taunted me when I was 9. Describe Emily's swing set accident, blood, and Gregory's reaction. Write about my fatigue, injuries, and Gregory's accusation that I was lazy. Write about my cancer diagnosis, shaving my head, and this strange feeling of liberation. Gregory stole everything from us, so I wrote furious entries some days. Sometimes I wrote about being terrified the cancer would kill me, and it would be worthless, but writing it down made it feel more true, like I was confirming it happened and wasn't a nightmare. Claire said both were legitimate, and to write whatever came to mind. Jack arrived at the flat one evening with a folder of paperwork to prepare us for the custody hearing 3 weeks away. He claimed Gregory's lawyer was alleging Rachel had abducted us and social services were overreacting. Jack said we had medical records, CPS reports, hospital records of Gregory's interference with my treatment, police reports of his court order violations, and teacher and doctor comments, but family court can be unpredictable, and the judge may order visits, even if Rachel gets custody. He stated judges were reluctant to take away a parent's rights without physical abuse, and Gregory's case was psychological control and medical negligence, which could be harder to prove. Rachel signed Jack's paperwork with shaking hands but a neat signature. Claire phoned Rachel the next morning, sounding professional but outraged, to advise her that Gregory had started posting on social media about us, stating the hospital abducted his girls and that Rachel was corrupted by anti-family people. Rachel opened his Facebook on her laptop and saw 20 entries from the past 12 hours with old photos of me and Emily with long hair. We were gorgeous before the system ruined us and removed our greatest glory. I didn't realize he had older photos, including one of me at 5 years old with my hair stretched out on the grass like a scary photo shoot. In the comments and shares, Gregory's relatives wrote about Rachel betraying the family and how we were jailed without our choice. Claire told us to capture everything but not respond or engage, since it showed the judge what Gregory cherished most. Claire copied all the screenshots to the evidence file and said Gregory was developing our case by exposing his infatuation. 3 days later, I returned to the hospital for my second chemotherapy session. Since I knew what to expect, I brought nausea-relieving snacks, comfy clothes, and a notebook to write in during the long hours of sitting. After 4 hours, I still felt the same strange coldness in my veins and metallic taste in my mouth. I took the anti-nausea medication before leaving the apartment, so the illness wasn't as bad. Midway through, Dr. Stevens reviewed my record and reported that my blood levels were improving and that therapy was reducing the malignancy, which we hoped. She advised me to do this for 7 months, maybe longer depending on my body's response, and there would be setbacks and bad days. But everything was going well. I felt both thankful and indignant as I watched the transparent liquid flow into my arm after she left. I was grateful that the treatment was killing cancer cells but annoyed that Gregory took so long to get me help. Rachel clasped my palm without speaking, and Hannah, the hospital's teen cancer support group leader, checked me a few days later. When she welcomed me to the Thursday evening conference room support group, she was 30 with short hair growing back in after cancer treatment and a calm, engaging voice that made you feel less alone. She recommended I try talking about cancer with unwell kids, but I was nervous entering the conference room on Thursday after Rachel accompanied me to the hospital. 8 teenagers sat in a circle, some with caps or scarves and some without hair. Hannah asked who wanted to talk about their therapy. Sarah, a 16-year-old girl, raised her hand and claimed she was in remission after 2 years. I straightened up and listened harder. Before cancer, her parents planned her life with ballet, piano, straight A's, and the perfect college. When she got sick, she realized she didn't want it. Cancer let her discover who she was instead of what others wanted. Sarah and I talked for 20 minutes after the meeting about what it was like to have your body drawn into others' problems. She gave me her number and told me to text her when I needed someone to understand. Rachel found Dr. Carter through the domestic violence program, and Dr. Carter offered Emily evening visits after school. Emily came home silent and didn't talk about it the first few sessions, but one night at supper, she said, "Dr. Carter." She said Dr. Carter described Gregory's hair control conduct as psychological abuse, and that the swing set scalp injury should have sparked a CPS probe years ago, and that teachers and doctors should document such instances. Rachel joined a domestic violence support group around the same time and returned every Tuesday night, exhausted but lighter. She said the group helped her spot trends, like how Gregory isolated her from friends and family, controlled her money, and made her feel like she needed him. As they healed, I noticed how toxic our family structure was. There were others with cancer. We all had various ailments and were recovering. Jack called 10 days before custody court to say Gregory's lawyer had messaged us. Gregory wanted to apologize with us, but Jack warned us via speakerphone in a serious voice that he highly recommended against it. He said this was likely a ploy to make Gregory appear good before the judge. He may say he tried reconciliation, but we declined. Jack assured Rachel that if we said no, the court wouldn't hold it against us and that we had every right to establish boundaries. I wondered whether Gregory would apologize or try to persuade us to go home, but Rachel chose for us. Jack agreed it was reasonable and would immediately react to Gregory's counsel. When the call ended, Emily looked relieved and Rachel looked resolute, and I knew Rachel was finally learning to defend us instead of Gregory's feelings. 2 days later, Jack delivered a packet of papers to the flat. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and asked me to tell the judge about the hours-long nightly hair-brushing sessions, the wig punishment when I was 9, Emily's scalp injury and Gregory's reaction, and feeling fatigued and unwell for weeks while Gregory said I was lazy. Jack transcribed what I said on his laptop and printed it for me to practice reading. I sobbed before reading the first line aloud because Jack stated showing emotion was good and the court needed to understand how this affected me, but I also wanted to live. After nearly an hour of practice, Rachel held my hand and Jack videotaped me on Rachel's phone so I could practice the words. I read the statement without breaking down, but my voice still shook when Gregory refused to take me to the doctor. Jack said I was doing well and my testimony may influence the judge. I scarcely slept the night before the hearing. Gregory combed my hair on the edge of my bed as he used to, but my hair grew back swiftly in the dream. Long strands from my head clung to my neck and arms like shackles. Gregory brushed farther and longer, constricting my throat. I tried to yell but failed. He kept brushing and smiled like nothing happened. I woke up gasping and reached for my head, feeling the silky skin and small stubble growing back. My heart raced so fast I thought I was sick. Rachel sat on my bed in the dark, possibly hearing me, and asked if I was okay. I described the dream, and she paused before saying tomorrow would change everything and we wouldn't return to that regardless of the judge's ruling. Rachel sat there while I fell asleep again. I didn't dream this time. The custody hearing started at 9 a.m. in a tiny courtroom that smelled like old wood and something else, maybe terror or years of people's misfortunes pouring into the walls. Gregory and his lawyer were at a table when we arrived. I'd never seen him wear a suit with nicely combed hair. He looked like a respectable father who'd been victimized by the system. The judge had gray hair and glasses and was probably in her 50s. After seeing 1,000 cases like ours, she sat at the huge desk at the front and explained that this hearing would decide interim custody and medical decision-making during the CPS investigation. She'd rule on what was best for the children after both parties presented facts and testimony. Jack presented our case first, starting with my cancer diagnosis and Gregory's treatment interference. I studied the judge's expression to see if he impacted her, but she looked neutral. Violet testified first. Jack questioned her after she sat in the witness chair and presented her research and findings at our home. She mentioned Gregory's grandmother's portraits on the walls, the expensive hair products in the cupboards, and the notebook where Gregory documented our hair development like a science experiment. The court examined each of her printed house images, extensive control history, and Violet described Emily's swing set scalp injury and my 9-year-old wig punishment. She read from her report about Gregory asking about Emily's hair when she was bleeding and crying. Violet denied Gregory's physical abuse to the judge. Next, Dr. Stevens testified via video conference on a large courtroom screen about my leukemia diagnosis and type. Psychological abuse may be more harmful than physical assault because it is harder to see and verify. My weeks-long symptoms included weariness, bruising, and bleeding gums, which any sane parent would have observed. She stated that Gregory's refusal to seek medical assistance while I was sick was medical negligence. She said her cancer progressed from early stage to advanced during those weeks without therapy. She mentioned Gregory's attempts to prevent me from having chemotherapy, and his focus on my hair rather than my survival. After therapy began, the judge asked about my prognosis. Dr. Stevens said sure, but more delays or disruptions might be disastrous. I needed 7 months of regular therapy, and my mother cooperated with the medical staff while my father was obstructive. The judge took notes throughout the hearing, writing faster when Dr. Stevens said the delay may have killed me. Jack rose and invited Rachel to the witness chair. When Jack asked Rachel about the marriage, her voice started softly but grew louder. Gregory controlled her clothing, hairstyle, and visibility. She said he isolated her from friends and family for 18 years, and left her with him. She described the 3 or 4 hour overnight hair combing while Gregory checked every inch for damage. She said he made her stand in front of him to inspect for split ends and would get upset if he found one. Rachel denied having bank accounts or credit cards. She glanced at the judge and said she should have defended us sooner, but she is now, and won't let Gregory control us again. The judge made notes and asked incident-specific questions. After Jack concluded, Rachel shook as she returned to sit with us. Gregory's lawyer then defended him, saying he came from a society that admired long hair on women, and that religious freedom protected his beliefs. Gregory never sought to hurt anybody on the stand. Gregory said he was preserving generations-old family customs and talked about his grandma and mother and how hair was holy. He said the cancer diagnosis was a shock and he waited to decide on therapy to absorb it. His lawyer submitted images of Gregory's mother and grandmother with ankle-length hair to depict cultural heritage rather than oppressive control. Gregory kept using tradition, morals, and holy. The judge noted that instructors and others saw I was sick and asked Gregory if my hair worried him enough to avoid medical care. Gregory stared at his lawyer for a long time before responding that he feared a doctor would clip it. The courtroom was silent. Judge scribbled rapidly. Jack stood up and said, "The judge didn't need to question me directly, which made relief flood through my whole body because I didn't think I could face Gregory in person." He read my statement. He said, "The medical records showing how my cancer got worse during the weeks Gregory refused to take me to a doctor." The court carefully reviewed the materials. I saw her face harden when she mentioned the wig penalty. Rachel pulled my hand so tight it hurt, but I didn't pull away. Emily kept asking if we had to return home with Gregory. Jack said the judge may grant Rachel partial custody, supervised visits, or full custody. Our case was sound, but family court was unexpected. His look showed he thought we'd win, but he wouldn't commit. The judge showed documents as we returned to court. She stared at Rachel and Gregory before reading her judgment. She gave Rachel temporary exclusive legal custody of me and Emily and sole medical decision-making power. Gregory paid for weekly 2-hour supervised visits with a trained monitor. The judge also ordered parenting and control treatment, which she said would last at least 7 months until Gregory showed he could respect limits and prioritize his children. I thought Gregory would get up and yell in court, but his lawyer talked in his ear while holding his arm. Gregory sat like someone died. When the judge said this, she looked directly at Gregory and appeared serious. Gregory's lawyer nodded in agreement. Gregory didn't speak. We left the courthouse through a side exit to avoid Gregory and walked to Rachel's car in the garage with Jack. He said sole custody and supervised visitation protected us while preserving Gregory's parental rights. Rachel wept and leaned against the car. Emily and I felt numb when we won. Judge believed us and prioritized safety over Gregory's feelings. Jack gave Rachel his card and advised her to call if Gregory tried to contact us or break the injunction. He advised us to document everything for the permanent custody court in 7 months. Rachel cooked spaghetti for dinner at the flat while Emily and I did schoolwork at the little kitchen table. Though routine, it seemed revolutionary since nobody was timing, examining, or regulating us. We could live without constant supervision. While staring at her phone, Rachel saw Gregory's number and declined the call. She checked her messages and sent Jack the call log as instructed. Gregory called again a few minutes later, and Rachel declined and handed Jack another screenshot. Managing boundaries was tougher than intended, and I felt bad for not responding. We tried defining normal. Rachel was ecstatic when she returned from work 2 weeks after the hearing. The medical billing company provided her a full-time, benefits-filled position that paid enough for rent on a modest apartment and basic essentials, especially with Gregory's child support. That weekend, Rachel showed us 2-bedroom flats near my hospital and Emily's new school. I had my first ideas on where we lived and how our home looked. Emily wanted a balcony, and I wanted to be near the hospital bus route. Rachel promised to find a solution for everyone. Rachel's new earnings and the first child support payment let us rent a lease the next week. On my 4th Tuesday afternoon chemotherapy treatment, I was less apprehensive. Someone started my IV while I sank into the customary infusion chair near the window. The staff recognized me now. My chart arrived and Dr. Stevens sat across from me with a faint smile. She said my cancer was responding better than expected. My blood levels were rising. I saw my reflection in the main entry glass pane and barely recognized myself as I left the hospital. I was fully bald with just a little stubble growing back, and my face looked smaller with dark bags under my eyes that made me look older. But all that hair made me look more genuine than ever. Rachel picked me up in her used vehicle after her first payday and drove me back to our new flat in silence. We were digesting the good news after years of survival. After 2 weeks in a modest apartment with mostly donated furniture, I heard the bathroom door close and a strange cutting sound like scissors going through something thick on a Saturday morning. Nobody was checking us or regulating what we did with our bodies. When I got out of bed and went to the bathroom, Rachel came out with a huge clump of hair clipped to shoulder length. She looked terrified but lighter, like she'd dropped something big after 18 years. She stood trembling and said she couldn't carry the weight longer. Seeing me go through chemo and Emily cut her hair helped her realize she was still allowing Gregory rule her, even though he was gone. Seeing her hair fall on the bathroom floor was like seeing shackles break since her hair was past her knees when I was born. Because Rachel's hands were shaking, Emily and I used scissors to level everything out. We all cried, but it was the good kind that means it's over. We cleaned up the hair and put it in a trash bag, and Rachel took it to the dumpster as proof. 3 months after the custody hearing, we adjusted to our new routine. I had chemotherapy every other week and attended school part-time with homebound instruction on illness days. Emily's short bob haircut and frequent therapy sessions helped her make friends who never knew the kid with floor-length hair who couldn't run at recess or play sports. After marrying Gregory at 19, Rachel worked at the medical billing business while taking midnight online classes to earn her college degree. Gregory had supervised visits at family services every Wednesday night, but he usually sat silently as the monitor took notes on her clipboard. He stopped trying to control us after the court ruling said he'd lose all access. He wasn't trying to connect or understand his mistakes. Last week's photo of us in front of our apartment building was on my phone. Rachel had wind-blown shoulder-length hair, Emily had a great haircut, and I had stubble. We weren't perfect or cured, but we were comfortable, free, and finally living like our bodies belonged to us, not someone else's idea. Enough for now.